Our first impressions of the Tikka T1x coming up. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is our first look at the Tikka T1x rifle. Now, I say first look because I only have about 100 rounds through it so far, and we have had just enough rounds downrange to get a good idea of what the baseline accuracy is and to make a few little tweaks to the stock rifle. So it is not in stock form sitting in front of me, but it is very close. So let's talk about what the T1x is overall and why we have it here and why it's sitting in front of me. So the T1x is a rimfire rifle from Tikka. It's obviously a bolt action. It comes with a 10-round magazine. And the reason that it is sitting here in front of me is because I saw it as a really good option for the base class in the National Rifle League 22 competitions. So base class rifles, rifle and optic has to come in under $1,050. So you really need to stick around that halfway mark, that $500 mark, to be able to get a good accurate rifle and a good reliable scope and still stay under the price point. Now, the MSRP on the T1x is about $499. We picked this one up at Whitaker's Guns for $419. Tikka did not send it to us. We did just go ahead and purchase the rifle because I kind of wanted to get this knocked out on a pretty quick timeline. Now, the rifle does have a injection molded polymer stock. It comes with a 20-inch barrel. There is apparently a 16.5-inch barrel model available. That would be my preference, but I couldn't find them in stock anywhere, so we went ahead and went with a 20-inch barrel model. It is threaded half 28, so most rimfire muzzle devices will fit on it. I went ahead and threaded our Gemtech Outback 2 suppressor on it, threaded on no problem, but we have not shot it with the suppressor on yet. But a very nice option because I probably will shoot it quite a bit with the suppressor on it. Now, this is not really a youth rifle per se. It still has a long enough length of pull that we can get on it with no problems. I don't feel crunched up on the rifle, although I am probably about average to a little bit above average on my length of pull and my general body size overall. The comb is a little bit low on this for mounting higher magnification variable power scopes like we use in NRL 22 competition, but we have a fix coming for that, and I'll talk about it shortly. The really neat thing about the T1x is it shares the footprint of the T3, and it also shares some of the accessories for the T3. So what that means is going forward, if we want to move this from base class into open class, we can drop this guy into other chassis options. So say for instance you run a T3 in PRS competition in something like a Modular Driven Technologies ACC chassis, then you have the ability to get an ACC chassis and drop the T1x into it and have that exact same feel. You could even put the same optic on it if you want. So that is a very large benefit. Now, if you don't want to go to that extent, you just want to get something that fits a little bit better in the factory stock, there are options like the KRG Bravo, which is a very affordable stock that is designed for the Tikka, and the action will drop into it. Now, if you want to stay in the base class like we did, then there are some other options direct from the factory. So you'll notice the grip on here is a little bit more vertical than what you see in the factory literature. And that's because this is actually the Tikka factory vertical grip module. The T3 and the T1x stocks accept these little modules. There's one screw hole at the bottom, and it clips in, levers into place, snaps in, and then is retained by one screw. And that gives you a much more comfortable reach to that trigger for shooting prone or shooting barricades. Now, a more laid back or traditional angled grip helps a rifle point a whole lot quicker in a lot of cases. If you're in a hunting scenario and you have to shoulder that rifle quickly, then I prefer that more swept back grip. But for precision rifle, I like an almost perfectly vertical grip. So this gets you a whole lot closer and moves your hand closer into the trigger. Up front here, we have the factory beaver tail forend, and most of the time, we're going to be shooting this rifle from prone, and so the standard forend, although it's a little bit narrow, is just fine. But the beaver tail forend widens things out a little bit more. It'll ride the bags or ride barricades just a little bit easier and keep that rifle vertical. And when we go to shoot offhand, it just has a little bit more meat on the sides to give you something to grip onto with your hand. So I decided to give it a try, but I will warn you on this. The forend is really designed more for the T3, not the T1X. So while it does go on and it does attach through the 2 screw holes, the fit and finish leaves quite a bit to be desired. The barrel channel doesn't line up quite right. There are some gaps here and there on it, but it's perfectly functional. And we're talking about in the $30 price range for each one of these pieces. So that definitely is an affordable upgrade for the rifle. And it is fitting it to your body. It's fitting the stock to your body without major changes, so it should not violate those base class rules. Now, the T1X does come with 10-round magazines. They are all plastic with the exception of the spring inside. I do really like that because a lot of times these kind of rifles come in with 5-round magazines, and that magazine just really isn't useful for anything other than zeroing the rifle. In NRL 22 competition, almost all of the stages are going to be 10-round stages. All the normal stages are 10-round stages. So we'll see overall what the durability of this is, because it is plastic feed lips. So dropping magazines on the ground, you may run into durability issues in the long run. I have 2 new magazines coming in. They are a little bit difficult to find right now. I managed to find them on Euro Optic, and they were $35 a piece, so not super cheap, but not ridiculously expensive. And one magazine really will get you through a whole NRL 22 match. However, like anything, spares are nice things to have. And if someone else is there and I want to allow them to run the rifle as well, then being able to have magazines that you can swap off. So if they're right behind you in the queue, then they can jump up there and not have to spend the time stuffing a mag. Loading the magazine was very easy. I don't think you're going to need a mag loader with these guys, although that last round does take a little bit of an extra push to get it in. It was not overly difficult. So even in cold weather, it should be fairly simple to load these. Now, again, we come back to that chassis interchangeability and the magazine issue. One really nice thing that Tikka did with this rifle is the magazine release and the mag well is actually screwed into the bottom of the action, not into the stock. So when we take this out of this stock and we put it into a centerfire T3 oriented stock, then that magwell goes with the action. The magwell just floats in the middle of the opening in the stock. So obviously it's much smaller than a centerfire magazine, but it still allows you to use the magazines. It still allows you to use the factory mag catch, and it's just a really nice design consideration overall. I'm really, really glad they did that because it really removes the need for any kind of crazy adapters or adapter magazines or any of that, and makes it very simple to switch over to a centerfire chassis or a centerfire stock. So coming back to the next most important part on this rifle, we'll talk about the trigger really quickly. And now this is where a lot of budget-priced rimfire rifles just really fall apart. Rifles out there like the Savage Mark II models, those generally the more modern ones have the AccuTrigger in them, and the AccuTrigger, I'm used to the AccuTrigger, but it has pros and it cons, and it feels kind of chintzy with that blade in the middle of it. That's my personal opinion, obviously. Although you can adjust the trigger down light enough, it just doesn't have a really good feel to it. A lot of the other 22 rifles out there, like the 1022, You really have to either deal with creep and grit and all this in its trigger, or you have to go to some fairly high-priced aftermarket options. The T1X, really, I kind of expected the same thing, and when I took it out for its first shooting, I really liked the feel of the trigger. It has a really crisp break on it, and I have really no bad things to say about it at all. Initially, it was heavy. It started out at just under 4 pounds for an average over 10 trigger pulls, and then we pulled the stock, and there is a single adjustment screw right in the front of the trigger. Backing that adjustment screw out will reduce your trigger pull, and just by backing it all the way out as far as we could without interfering with the trigger mounting screw, we were able to get this down to 1.5 pounds, and it's a very crisp, very safe 1.5 pounds. So we went from okay, nice and crisp, but kind of heavy, which is not a good thing on a light rifle, down to 1.5 pounds. Now, even with that almost 4-pound trigger pull, we were able to turn in some really good accuracy with the rifle. But with the 1.5 pounds, it's going to be a lot more enjoyable to shoot. Now, if you want to go beyond that, there are a bunch of other options out there, because again, this does take the same triggers as the T3. But if you want to kind of stop before you go full bore on it, there are options like this is a Yo-Dave trigger spring, and it's $10. It's just a single spring to install into the trigger where the factory spring was. Fairly simple to install. You just pull the trigger mounting screw, pull that adjustment screw all the way out, put the spring in, put the adjustment screw back in, trigger screw back in, and you're done. And we have gotten great reports about dialing this trigger pull down to as low as 12 ounces. I have not had a chance to put it in the rifle yet. That will go in the next round of modifications to see where we're at. But really, 1.5 pounds with no extra modifications, just turning a screw, is a great option in this rifle. Now, the bolt lift is one other spot that I kind of have both good things and bad things to say about it. I love the fact that it is a very short bolt lift. So when the bolt is up, it is sticking pretty much 90 degrees out of the side of the action. So if you're running things like a cattail on your scope, or you have large turrets, large rings, then even though the bolt handle is kind of stubby, it still sticks out here far enough that you're able to sweep it back with your hand, drive it forward with your thumb, and lock it back down. Now, the bolt lift after firing is a little bit heavier than I would like to see on a 22 rifle, especially a lightweight 22, because when you get them too heavy and you go to lift the bolt with your bladed hand, you tend to start to disrupt the rifle a little bit. So I like them to be fairly lightweight, or I like to have a little bit more leverage on them. I think they could have added probably about another 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch to this bolt handle and been really well set up. But this does appear to be more of a hunting pattern rifle, so I do understand the shorter bolt handle. Thankfully, again, the aftermarket does come to your rescue, and we've got a DIP Products extended larger bolt handle. This is more of a tactical knob like we have on most of our centerfire rifles. And you just remove a screw in the center of the factory bolt handle, put a little Loctite on this guy, thread it on, and then grab some soft jaw pliers and tighten it down a little bit, and you should be good to go with this guy. Now, again, this is not a listed modification for base class, so if you put one of these on, it's going to bounce you out, I believe. We need to talk to the guys at NRL 22 first before we recommend this modification. But again, if you're shooting base class, this bolt knob is really not what is going to set you back. Now, let's talk about the most important part about the rifle, and that is the barrel and the accuracy. Now, the barrel on here is a little bit lighter weight than what I normally like to see on target-oriented 22s. Tikka calls this kind of a hybrid barrel. So we've got a good deal of meat back here at the chamber area, but we taper down to more of a hunting profile barrel up here towards the front. So I was not expecting stellar accuracy out of it, but what I got really surprised me. We sat down and did quick abbreviated ammo testing at 50 yards. Once we got the rifle zeroed in, then we were able to lay down some groups, and wolf match target was a little bit over half-inch groups at 50 yards. We shot some Norma and some Lapua Center X. The Norma Match 22 actually shot best in this rifle. And again, we've got the trigger tuned now, so I need to go out and shoot some more groups and see if we can get just a little bit better accuracy out of the Lapua and the Wolf ammunition. But the Norma was laying in sub half-inch groups at 50 yards for 5 shots and doing it repeatably. So again, that is sub MOA accuracy out of this rifle. Tikka does guarantee 1 MOA accuracy out of them. So we're doing good with this rifle the way it sits in stock form here. And of course, you are kind of married to this stock barrel for base class. And at this point, I don't know anybody that is manufacturing replacement barrels for them. I've seen some blurbs on different forums out there about guys adapting other barrels to fit them. I believe that we have a smooth receiver in the, a smooth shank in the receiver, and it looks like 3 Torx screws that are actually holding the barrel in through the bottom of the receiver. Now, I have not pulled the barrel apart because, again, we are still doing accuracy testing. I don't want to take a factory rifle, remove the barrel, and then have to go through all the shenanigans to get it back in and headspace correctly. But I don't really think you need to do that with this barrel until somebody else starts coming out with some factory replacement barrels and you want to make that jump to open class. The barrel in here is going to be very good as far as the weight and the size of this rifle is overall. So generally, I got great accuracy out of it, but we're going to try one more time because I did notice that the barrel was not fully free-floated from the factory. Back here towards the chamber area of the barrel where it tapers down quickly, they have this filler plate in the stock. And I believe what this is I think there's a slightly different profile between the 17 HMR and the 22. I'm not 100% certain on that. But I believe that's the purpose for this little filler plate. And it sits on a ledge at the front here. And that pushes this ledge on this filler plate up into the bottom of the barrel. So we do end up with a pressure point just in front of the taper from the chamber area down into the rest of the barrel. Now, it's only held in by 1 screw. Extremely easy to remove. You just back out the screw, lift it up. It has a little notch here in the back. It comes right out of the stock. And now we have a full free float from the receiver all the way to the muzzle. So when we get it out for follow-up testing, I want to see if that has increased our accuracy. But again, as it comes right out of the box, we're getting half-inch 5-shot groups at 100 or at 50 yards with Norma Match 22. So give that a try. You should be fairly impressed. Now, one drawback with this rifle is that when it comes from the factory, it has a 11mm dovetail in the top of the receiver. So you can go ahead and get air gun or 22 rings. Those will mount right up onto the receiver. But we really didn't want to go that route. We went ahead and put a Tasco varmint scope with 22 rings on it to start out. But before we even got to our first range session, our DIP scope base arrived. And the DIP scope base is a really nice product. It goes from that 11mm dovetail to standard Picatinny spec cross slots. And it actually slides into the dovetail. So it doesn't just sit down onto it. It does grip that dovetail and slides in, and then is secured by 4 Torx screws down into the action. So once you get it in, once you Loctite those screws in, it shouldn't go anywhere because not only is it held down with the screws, but it is held in place by the dovetail. It is a little bit extended up here, so we didn't set up the rings on the scope specifically for this rifle. We just dropped it in. We already had the rings mounted on it. So we were able to get proper eye relief and get a good position on the rail without any problem at all. And our Picatinny rails, our Picatinny rings fit on the rail just fine. So far, I'm very impressed with the DIP scope base at the price point it is at. Now, there are a couple of other options out there. Area 419 makes a scope base as well. It's about twice as expensive as the DIP product, but all Area 419's products are very, very well machined. So we may look at that a little bit later on in our process of building this rifle up. Now, back to the comb. We'll talk about this real quick. With the scope mounted the way we are here with medium rings on it, and this is a Athlon Argos BTR 8 to 34 by 56 millimeter rifle scope. It does fall into that base class price point, so this whole rifle, the way it sits right now, can compete in NRL 22 base class. It falls underneath the price cutoff. The scope does sit a little bit higher because of the 56 millimeter objective and because of the scope cap here, but this is a good setup overall. I have to get just a little bit higher than my normal natural cheek weld to be able to see through the scope and get proper eye relief. But the solution that we have is on the way. We're going to put some Titan universal cheek spacers on here from Victor Company. Hopefully those will be here on Monday and we can get them dropped in and get them screwed in. And that still is allowable for NRL 22 base class. They're not expensive at all, but if you are really crunching on a budget, then the simple solution is just go to your local sporting goods store, your local surplus store, buy an old military ISO mat, cut it up, put some foam strips on here, and duct tape them or riggers tape them onto the stock. That is a combat tested method of building up a cheek spacer. Very cheap, very easy to do, and very easy to customize to exactly what you need. I just don't like it because I did it for a long time. They get nasty. They start to fall apart after years of use, and I'd rather just put the cheek spacer on, screw it in, and be done with that, and it will look nicer overall. So that is what we have on the horizon. If the length of pull is not correct for you, one other option that you have is Beretta USA and various different Tikka dealers do carry a replacement recoil pad that will give you a little bit of extra length of pull. If you need more than that, you should be able to install some spacers in the buttstock. It should be something easy to make up. This will work fine for what we're doing right now, so I don't feel the need to increase the length of pull. But again, you can do that if you need to. And one final thing that we'll talk about, because it's something that I may end up having to modify at a later point, is sling mounting. For NRL 22, you will shoot sling supported stages, so being able to attach a sling to the rifle is a really important option. Now, you can shoot offhand without a sling for the purpose of the match. You're just not going to do as well as you would with a sling. So the T1X only has one sling stud up front and one sling stud out back. And obviously we are using the sling stud up front to mount our Harris bipod on here. And the sling stud out back is not in where I would say the ideal position is to mount a sling, but it is workable. So when we're shooting sling supported, we could just attach the sling to the bottom of the stock, or I'm sorry, the bottom of the bipod here. There is a sling adapter and on the back here, but that really moves that point back a little bit too far and it moves it low. So when you wrap the sling up, it doesn't feel as good. Options are, of course, to just pull the bipod off and use that point, but I really wish they had run a sling attach or a bipod stud further forward so we could use the rear sling attachment. And I may end up installing flush cups on the side of the stock because most of the slings that I have do utilize flush cup mounting points. So that is my one last gripe over it, but overall the T1X has performed very well for an out-of-the-box $500 22 rifle. So super impressed with it. They did use some plastic parts where they could. Obviously, trigger guard is plastic. The bolt shroud is plastic. But the important things were taken care of, like the excellent trigger on it, the nice short bolt lift and short bolt throw, and the accurate barrel in it. So that is our initial impression with the Tikka T1X. You will see me come back in a few weeks and give you an overall report on the T1X once we get it all dialed in exactly the way we want it, and once we shoot a NRL 22 match with the T1X in base class. If you guys have any questions over the Tikka T1X or anything we discussed, please put it in the comment section down below or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you like the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Click that little bell icon down there if you want to be notified when we release new videos. If you guys want to see sneak peeks over stuff that we are working on, like the Tikka T1X here, head over to Patreon and check us out. We would love to have you over there so you can support videos that you know and love and get sneak peeks at things that we are working on before we actually release the videos. So click the link down below and check out Patreon. And as always, until next time, get out and shoot.